Hello everyone, welcome back. Now today I will be reviewing, ranking and reviewing every single book that I read in the month of February. A quick note before I begin. It was a very positive month. None of the books on this list, were terrible. I really loved all of them, which is great. I love reading books that I love, and even the book that made the bottom of this list wasn't terrible, it just wasn't the best. So, none of the books on this list were terrible. But anyway, first up on this list is The Treason of Isengard by J.R.R. Tolkien. This is book 7 out of 12 of the History of Middle-earth series. Now, you may already know this, I've discussed this in previous videos, but just in case you don't, after J.R.R. Tolkien died, he left behind a huge mass of manuscripts, and papers in his office that his son Christopher actually found and edited them and published them later, after his father's death, which is really interesting. And so, the books that were published after Tolkien's death is, the 12-volume History of Middle-earth series, the Silmarillion, The Children of Húrin, Beren and Luthien, The Fall of Gondolin, all of those, and a whole bunch of others. And it's really interesting that, most of the books that Tolkien actually wrote in his lifetime were actually published after his death, which is really interesting. But anyway, the History of Middle-earth series is the history of how Tolkien wrote Middle-earth. So Christopher Tolkien presents a ton of earlier drafts and outlines for the Silmarillion, the Lord of the Rings, and other works of his father's. And it's really interesting. So, books 1 through 5 of the History of Middle-earth focused mostly on how Tolkien wrote the Silmarillion, and then I believe books 6 through 9 are going to focus on the Lord of the Rings. And you really have to take it slowly. I'm reading one History of Middle-earth book a month because it's kind of a lot to get through. But definitely worth your time. Takes a lot of time. You really got to take it slowly with these books, so that's what I'm doing. It was really interesting seeing Tolkien's writing process in this book for The Lord of the Rings. This went from, how he wrote and drafted Gandalf's Delay all the way to The King of the Golden Hall. It was really interesting seeing Tolkien's writing process. I definitely recommend the History of Middle-earth series. And if you're not as well versed in, the Silmarillion, then I'd say you could just read volumes 6 through 9 first, if you are interested in how Tolkien wrote The Lord of the Rings. You don't necessarily have to read them in order. But there are a lot to get through, so I'm taking it slowly, one book a month. Really fantastic read, interesting to see Tolkien's writing process. 10 out of 10, you should definitely read it. Just a really quick note here. With this particular edition that I had, it was really annoying reading it because, the dust jacket slips out so easily. Literally, all you have to do is hold it up and the dust jacket just starts slipping out. So, I mean, obviously this isn't what I'm here to talk about, but, it was really annoying reading it and the dust jacket would just slip out. So yeah, anyway, 10 out of 10, you should definitely read it. Really great book. I've had a lot of fun reading it, and I just started the 8th volume, so I'll finish that this month in March. The next book on this list is also a 10 out of 10, but not as much of a 10 out of 10 as the last one, should I say. Maybe I should give it a 9.9 out of 10, but it was another Tolkien book, The Legend of Sigurd and Gudrun. Now, I did review this book in its own little video, so I'll leave a link to that video in the description down below. This was a really great book. So The Legend of Sigurd and Gudrun, and you know this if you've already seen my review, but it was originally an ancient Norse saga about Sigurd, how he slew the dragon Fafnir, how he came to be betrothed to Brynhild, and all this. And this, along with Beowulf, was Tolkien's top 2 absolute favorite works of literature of all time. And so, Tolkien wrote his own version of The Legend of Sigurd and Gudrun, in this form of epic poetry, which is really fantastic. I really think this book deserves more attention. And Christopher Tolkien obviously provides in-depth commentary and analysis alongside it. Again, a bit much to get through. I wouldn't say I enjoyed it as much as Tolkien's Middle-earth works, but it was still an absolutely fantastic read, and you should definitely read it. You can really see how Tolkien was inspired by this legend for his Middle-earth works, because there's a ton of similarities between this and The Children of Húrin, I noticed. So you should definitely read this. 9.9 out of 10. Absolutely, absolutely fantastic. You don't really hear about this Tolkien book that often, which is a shame. I really think it deserves more attention, so 9.9 and a half out of 10. You should read it. Definitely. I unfortunately do not have the next book on this list because I got it from the library and I had to return it. But it was the 11th book in the Flavia de Luce series. It was called What Time the Sexton's Spade Doth Rust. Now, I have the first 4 books on the shelf here, but I also did a review of this entire series. You can see that. I'll also leave a link to that in the description. But the Flavia de Luce series is basically about this 11-year-old girl who has sort of a strange passion and hobby for messing around with poisons, and they're like murder mysteries. So like someone gets murdered, Flavia finds out who did it, and she really has to fare by herself because her father is just consumed by his work, and her 2 older sisters are absolutely beastly to her, and her mother died when she was a very young child, so she really has to fare by herself. They're fabulous, fabulous books. There's 11 books in the series currently. Alan Bradley never seems to run out of new ideas. This was a great book. It was like, I mean, it was better than some of the Flavia de Luce books, but not as good as some. I think like the first 3 were really good, and then they were okay, but still leaning towards fantastic. They were good. And this one had a really big reveal as well that I did not see coming. So they're all like basically little stories that fit into a larger story. And this book did not disappoint. It was fantastic. Alan Bradley never seems to run out of new and creative ideas. You should definitely read the Flavia de Luce series. I really recommend them. I'll give this one a 9.5 out of 10. The next book on this list, I do own. It is The Bark of the Bog Owl. This is the first book in the Wilder King trilogy by Jonathan Rogers. So, this takes place in a world called Corinwald. And there's this little shepherd boy called Aiden Errolson, son of Errol, and he's the youngest boy in his family, looked down upon by his older brothers. And there's also these Fichi folk, which are basically like wild people living in the forests, and the Cornwalders don't believe they exist, and the Fichis don't believe that the Cornwalders, or civilizers as they call them, exist. This exceeded my expectations. This was a very good book. Really quick and easy read, too. It's pretty short. I think this would be a great read aloud for the family as well, but also a book that you can enjoy by yourself. It still wasn't the best. It was good, but not great. It wasn't the most original story, but still really good. Like, the way it was executed, the way it was told, was really good. Jonathan Rogers did a great job, and he also noticeably based a lot of the events in this book off of the Bible, which was really interesting. So, I'll give it an 8 out of 10. I would still recommend it. You know, it's not the best, in my opinion, but still a really strong book. Really enjoyed it. The next book on this list is the second book in the Wilder King trilogy. It's called The Secret of the Swamp King. This book was almost as good as the first one, and it took a really interesting turn. Like, the story went in a way that I was not expecting it to, which really made me excited to hop into book 3, which I did, like, 10 seconds after putting this book down. It wasn't as good as book 1, I would say. It was still really good. I really enjoyed it. I would recommend the Wilder King trilogy, but something about it just wasn't as great as the first book. I don't really know how to explain it, but still a great book. Things took a really interesting turn. You should definitely read these books. Pretty short, fun, easy reads. They're sort of like fantasy for children, so you should probably read it. And then the next book, is one that I was made to read for school, another pretty short one, only about like 150 pages. It's A Gathering of Days by Joan W. Bloss. Now, I really enjoyed this one. It wasn't really what I usually read, so This is basically, like, the fictional journal of a 13-year-old girl, from 1830 to 1832. And just her everyday life, what goes on. Really interesting read. It's one that I'll probably reread. I would recommend it. You know, it wasn't what I usually read, but still really fun, and interesting. There's not much to say on it. I'll give it maybe a 7.5 or 8 out of 10. 7.5, how about? I would recommend it. You know, not what I usually read, but still pretty good. And the final book on this list was by no means, like, a terrible book, but not the strongest. It was the final book in the Wilder King trilogy, The Way of the Wilder King. Now, I really enjoyed this one, but the ending was just, like, the final battle was just summarized in 20 pages, and the ending was very abrupt and honestly felt kind of lame. I felt like things definitely could have been fleshed out better. This could have been a better book. It was by no means terrible. It was fine. It was good. Not exactly great, though. I would still recommend the Wilder King trilogy, but the ending to me just felt very abrupt. Still a good book, you know, a very satisfying ending, if a very abrupt one. So, 7 out of 10. You should still read the Wilder King trilogy. All the books on this list, really, you should read. They were all great. Whew, that was a long video. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed watching it, please hit that like button, smash it kindly, smash it lovingly, and please subscribe to my channel, as not only do I do lots of book reviews, such as this one, but also, you know, basically anything else related to books. And once I hit 500 subscribers, I will be giving you a tour of my bookshelves. So, not just the bookshelves that you see here, but also the ones above them, and the ones on the other side of the room as well. Well, thank you so much for watching this video. Farewell.